Hello, and welcome to the 9th episode of the ugh.podcast. Today we are talking about relationships. Now, the concept of relationships is pretty difficult to talk about because it's very complex. Everyone has like their own interpretation of what a healthy relationship is. And it's also a very abstract kind of way of thinking, or an abstract idea of what a relationship actually is. So today we're only going to explore romantic relationships. Today we're talking about healthy romantic relationships, how to set boundaries, how to handle disagreement and conflicts, and yada yada yada. This episode, I think all of us were pretty excited to share about. The reason why we started the UJH podcast was because I think a lot of us were going through a hard time, whether it was through breakups or just like relationships or just like things in general that just really made it difficult for us to cope. So I think all of us, myself, Vince, and Ronald, were just very excited just for today's episode. So I really hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did. Yeah. I hate doing these intros. I don't fucking know what to say. But like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for sharing. For those of you who are sharing, it really does help kind of just like build UJH podcast. We are pretty small, and so we have a lot of fun doing this, and it's good that our voices can be heard by many people, and also we can have conversations with people we just never met before. So yeah, thank you so much for just sharing and supporting us. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys inside the episode. Have a great rest of the day or evening or morning, and yeah, take care.
I love you.
Whatever.
All right. Welcome back.
It's been a while. To a normal episode. Yeah, find like an actual normal episode. Yeah. We had
like 2 episodes, bro.
We had a Discord episode, then we had the mukbang, and probably the mukbang is coming out later, so we're gonna be on hiatus for a little while.
Yeah, for a little while.
So when this comes out, it's probably like what? A month from now, maybe, because
maybe December, maybe January,
maybe Christmas, when people are like having spending time with their family, they realize they're actually lonely, and then like, don't worry, we got you. We'll talk about romantic relationships.
Damn. So today is the long-awaited episode. We put this off for a while because I think
we just need to be in the right headspace to speak about it. I feel like, yeah.
See, I even got a notebook so I can write down my thoughts, bro.
I'm gonna talk unfiltered and say something stupid probably. Yeah.
We get to talk about relationships, and not just like any regular relationships. We're talking about romantic relationships today. Obviously, all 3 of us have not been single men all our lives, so we've obviously all been in relationships at one point in our life. So I think we are more than qualified to talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think relationships, and sorry, just so we don't take fucking 5 hours to record this episode, like relationships in general is a large ass topic to tackle. So we were like, I think we need to split it up. So we decided today we're doing specifically romantic relationships, but some of these things can overlap between whatever relationships.
Yeah, different episodes and stuff like that. Yeah.
So we'll definitely
Well, I think for right now we're just gonna tackle like romantic relationships as a broad topic.
Romance,
because like romance in general, like there's different stages and all that stuff is just there's a lot to cover. There's a lot we have to say on like a lot of this stuff. So yeah,
and I think we're in that like us and also a majority of our audience are in that age where like we're kind of growing out of that what we thought relationships or what we thought kind of like love was in like middle school or high school or like post-secondary. Now we're like having a more mature concept.
Serious.
There was also a lot of COVID breakups, and the reason why I felt like there was a lot of COVID breakups because I felt like that was the first time couples could actually have time to spend together and talk about their problems. Right? Yeah. Instead of just like, all right, I'll see you like next weekend. We'll fight, and then we'll just like spur time, and like the cycle would just continue, but they wouldn't actually confront like the problems. That was the first time they were like, we have all this free time. So it's not like, oh, I got work. It's like, no, we're together. We're going to confront. And for some people,
this is happening.
That was and some people had to like, actually work through their relationship. And for some, the actual solution was to call it quits. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that was like the solution that I think some people went through, and some people, but no shame if you are single or if you're in a relationship. I see a lot of people who like shame vice versa. We don't give a fuck. We're just going to talk about it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Cool. First question.
I think the broad topic is, what is the key to a healthy relationship? I think it's a good question to start off.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first, Vince, since you have?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the Instagram responses were about communication. And while I do believe communication is like the most important thing in a relationship, I kind of went in a different way, in a different kind of route. And I said like the key to a healthy relationship is getting over that honeymoon period. So what I'm talking about is like in the beginning of the relationship where you're like just obsessed with each other and like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I found the love of my life or whatever.
You're fucking all the time.
Literally meet every week, bro.
And like showing them off. I saw this one Twitter post, and I don't know if she's this person from Calgary or whatever the fuck, but I think she's like a little bit younger than us. Where it's like she was showing off her boyfriend or whatever, and they've only been together for
I remember this.
1 month.
Oh my god, I remember this.
They've only been together. They've only been together for 1 month, and this guy is like, he planned out their like basically like 1 month anniversary fucking date or whatever, and it was like a whole plan throughout the day.
Yeah,
like, oh, we're gonna go to this place, we're gonna go to Cheesecake Factory, we're gonna like go to this hill and like take pictures and stuff. And I'm like,
Crescent Heights.
Oh,
Crescent Heights true combo.
If that's how he rolls, bro.
Crescent Heights to Casada to a workshop free combo. I'm just playing, so I continue.
Anyway, so I mean, there's nothing wrong with like showing that kind of affection. And what kind of really irked me is that her caption on it is like, if he really wanted to, he would. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, we need to talk about that. That's an extra question we're gonna ask.
Sure.
Go ahead.
But come back to me and show me what happens after like a couple of years, you know, where I don't know, he maybe have run out of ideas or whatever the fuck, or basically like in a long-term relationship, you'll get bored because, you know, that person unless you put in the work to like keep getting to know that person and you know, keep showing that person like, yes, I'm committed to this, then you'll get bored and you'll be like, oh, like it's just the same kind of routine every single week, every single month, like every single anniversary is kind of the same thing. So it's getting over that honeymoon period and realizing that it's not going to feel like that for the entire relationship. Like there'll be ups and downs, and later on in the episode we'll talk about like disagreements and stuff.
Yeah, be willing to accept that it's not going to always feel like
it's a commitment and a half. Like,
dude, more than a commitment.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And like, I guess the biggest thing is like when you're in a relationship, like finding your purpose. Like, why are you in a relationship? Like, if you just want to like sleep around, well, you can do that single and without strings attached. If that's what you want.
Nothing's wrong with casual sex, and I think that's something that I think I remember tweeting about. I don't know. You guys remember where I was talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, like, you know, stop just casually dating with the expectations of a relationship.
Exactly.
Just casual date, you know.
And as Jason said, there's nothing wrong with that. But if
there's nothing wrong with getting your dick wet, bro.
If you're going into casual dating with the expectation that, or right away with the expectation right away that you'll find like the love of your life, or it's like that person, the one, then honestly, like you have to be on the same page with that. And one last point before I pass it on is like a lot of people have the illusion that a long-term relationship is like a good relationship.
I was actually going to comment on that, but
and I don't know if it's in the other questions, but it's really not. Like you can be in a long-term relationship like 3, 4, 5 years and not be happy and not be fulfilled. And then what, like you want people to be jealous of you because, oh, I've been with this person for 5 years, but guess what? You're not happy. So what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess that's all I had to say.
Coming out aggressive.
That Twitter post just really annoyed me, and I'm
bro. It just turned on a switch.
I don't want to be like, oh, grumpy old man. Like, don't want to see people happy, but
yeah.
You don't know how it is, man. It gets harder.
No,
Why did it trigger you? Let's talk about it. How do you feel about it?
Hey, this is not a therapy session.
I'm just kidding. No, we're not. Yeah, we're not here to unpack trauma. But yeah, do you want to go?
I can go next.
Okay, cool.
I think so I honestly agree with a lot of people on the Instagram question. I do agree that communication is a very, very key like aspect, but I think it goes beyond like just I think it goes beyond just the broad aspect of communication. I definitely believe it comes down to knowing your love language, and if your love languages are compatible, or not even just compatible, but knowing like what you like to receive and what you like to give. And I think that's a sense of compatibility in itself. More oftentimes when I get to know like specific people, like even just with friendships, but more like on the kind of romantic side, I know what love language I like to give, and I know what love language I like to communicate, but I also know what love language I really, really like to receive. And I think a lot of the problems that have stemmed in a lot of, I guess, unhealthy rough patches that I've had in a lot of my long-term relationships, or even just my short-term relationships, would be like they don't know me. They either don't know me well enough, or they don't necessarily kind of communicate that, or I don't communicate what my love language is, or they don't communicate what their love language is. And that's where a lot of the problems stem from. Like, there's a lot of times where one of my very big love languages is giving gifts. And I always thought that giving gifts would more often than not smooth a lot of things over. And for some people, that definitely helps. That definitely works. But for other people, it just doesn't work and it doesn't help. Obviously, I have to tap into other love languages that I can give that I'm not necessarily too familiar with. But I think end all be all, the key to a healthy relationship is knowing your love language and knowing how that love language is communicated to the other person. And I think that's where a lot of the problems for me was just stemmed in, where it eventually just deteriorated to an unhealthy relationship because and I also do believe that as you grow older and as you grow more mature, your love language can change. I think
different needs.
Like different needs in different periods of your lifetime. And to be honest, like even on some other days, your love language can definitely change. Like one day you might need words of like what's it called? Words of affirmation. I was just saying assurance, bro. Words of affirmation, and then other days you might need like other ways you might need like gift giving, or other ways you might need like
a dirty hand job,
physical touch and shit like that. But
edit that out, please.
But yeah, that's kind of like what I'm just trying to get down to, like just communicating what love language you need and knowing what love language you give and whether that's compatible or not. I think is very, very key.
Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to talk too much. I feel like I have so much to fucking say, but like I also wait,
just give me a second.
I also like keeping our episodes under an hour because it makes it more like enjoyable to listen to, but
it makes it more like
digestible. Yeah, not too much information, it's not overwhelming. But yeah, just the bounce off like what Vince was saying of like, you know, I always, the one like kind of like, I guess like corny quote I always hate to myself, where I think a healthy relationship is better than a long-term one, but a long-term complements a healthy one pretty well. Yeah, because that is the goal, obviously, to have like something long-term and consistent, sustainable, right? Because I think jumping from relationship to relationship is obviously very damaging. But personally, what I feel like is the key to healthy relationship is, first of all, one is that the two people want to be in a relationship, and two, they want to have to try and put work in that relationship. Which I feel like, because I feel like when it comes to communication, that it's a very like broad term, and it obviously is important, but like, especially when, you know, a lot of times when you communicate how you feel, you know, whether that's boundaries or just like, hey, I don't appreciate that, blah, blah, like, hey, this hurts me. Sometimes there are people that are sometimes committed to disagreeing with you. And that's something you have to have, like, you know, is something you're going to have to deal with, right? And so at that point, is it like, am I communicating enough? Is that why the relationship is failing? Or is it because like my partner is also not pulling in the weight? Right. And like kind of just to bounce off the whole like the first month anniversary thing. Because I remember, and I'm not gonna mention her name, but the partner I had before Karen, she celebrated 1 month, and like I was so thrown off because I like never celebrate 1 month. And like, you know, like her best friend went up to me, he's like, "Oh, happy 1 month," and I was like, "What the fuck?" Like, I was like, who celebrates 1 month? I was so thrown off, right? And like I didn't celebrate 1 month with Karen either, but I think one of the things we kind of talked about was like, you know what? If people want to celebrate 1 month, like kind of just let them, because kind of an argument that, and I'm sorry, baby, but I'm gonna kind of talk about some of the problems that we've had, but some of the resolutions we came through was she kind of called me out on like, but she asked me this question. She was like, if you love someone very much, like how would you show that you love them and you care about them? And I was like, I don't know, buy him stuff. You know, because you said buy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, because like,
let's go.
you know what I mean? Like, and I talk about this because I know in the last episode I talked like you were saying you were ashamed about like being romantic, and I remember I also was a part of that problem where I would shame you, like almost like make fun of you for being corny romantic, right? And the reason why, and like kind of just talking about like my feelings, was because like a lot of times when I did see a lot of these dudes being like hyper romantic, I think all of us know that they were just trying to get their dick wet. Like, you know, it was fake. It was that nice guy that finished last. It was that dude who was kind of like, you know. He was a fuckboy. He was a scummy, right? So we were trying our hardest not to be that romantic dude, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're afraid of being corny, we're afraid to be cringe, right?
Yeah. Just to add on, like afraid of being corny and cringe, like in front of people.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
and it's not like I'm gonna like make out with my girlfriend in front of everyone, right? But like, you know, like especially when the homies are around, you know, you're very like. Your voice gets lower. You start saying bro all of a sudden, like you know what I mean.
It's like, what's good, bro? And she's like, she looks at you.
Like you never act against. Yeah, so because it was funny because and Zia so I'm gonna fucking talk his name, but basically she was like, you know, because the reason why she said that is because like sometimes I don't feel like I'm loved, right? It's like what's the difference between the way you treat Ziad and the way you treat me, right? Because I hold hands with Ziad sometimes, right? And I was like, you know, I'm like physically intimate, like I hold on to him because I care about him a lot, and I was like. That makes sense, right? And so how I see romantic relationships or relationships in general, like with romantic and like platonic, I still equate them as the same thing. Like my friendships are just as important as my romantic relationship, but they have some difference. And the key thing is romance, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of men are very scared of showing romance, right? And so I tried, and I realized that when I was trying to be like, I guess more corny, I was like, fuck, it hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts.
I feel that.
It feels
like,
weird.
So
I'm such a fucking simp, and like and we have that whole like simp shaming culture, or whatever, right? And so we're very uncomfortable. But the thing is, like, a simp is not someone who treats their partner right. A simp is the one who like only does nice things for their partner to get laid. Like that's literally, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but just to answer the question, I know I went off topic, but like, you know. I still find the whole 1 month kind of cringe, like, but also at the same time, like, who am I to judge? Whatever.
You do you, bro.
Like, you're gonna break up 2 months after. No, I'm just playing. But what is it? In my opinion, I think the key to a healthy relationship is not only two people who want to, but two people who are putting the effort. It takes two to tango, and if one is being stubborn, or you know, one is not like pulling their weight, then the relationship falls apart because like. You can't force someone to want to be in a relationship, which is kind of a hard thing to accept where like, you know, you can putting all this effort in and you can like try to be working on your own problems, right? But then you're like, hey, I don't appreciate when you do this. And they're like, but that's just the way I am, you know, that's just how I am. I can't help myself. When I'm angry, I just can't help myself, you know, and like you're being gaslit, right? And it sucks because like you want them to want to be in a relationship, but sometimes that's not always the case, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's very hard because and this is kind of talking about trust because you're putting your trust into someone else. Mm-hmm. You're putting effort and you're also putting trust that they want to put effort. So like, I think the reason why a lot of relationships do fail is because sometimes like either one or both are not being a proper partner and they're not putting in work on themselves or just in the relationship as well. And that's how I see like key to healthy relationships. Yeah. But
yeah. I think I think one of you guys mentioned this earlier and I want to touch on it just because I think out of the three of us, I don't want to dox either of you, but I think out of the three of us, I'm probably the most single.
The most single. It's like a tier list.
and yeah, so if it's like, well, so I'm like S tier.
That says we're single. Dave's single. Anyway, go ahead.
And I've talked about this with me. I've talked about this with me and my brother because me and my brother are kind of at the same point of like tier of single. And I think one of you guys touched on just like getting into a relationship or like talking to people. Or no, casually dating. That's what we were touching on. And me and my brother are kind of at that point where we're casually dating. We're trying to find like a partner. Where I definitely date with the kind of the underlying meaning of being in a serious relationship. So I tend to find at fault that I get way too serious too quick. And definitely that's a problem I need to work through. Shut the fuck up.
Me and Lawrence are just looking at each other. Oh shit.
But I think one thing, especially for my single guys out there, that you guys need to learn, especially if you are like coming out of a long-term relationship, is that trust isn't built overnight, and getting to know someone isn't built overnight either. And getting into a serious relationship and building those building blocks takes time. When I first got out of my previous relationship, I was dating to get into another serious relationship. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But also at the time, like I think I was just trying to find that love that I had overnight. And that's where I went wrong, you know? And that's where you kind of need to take time to yourself and just figure out like, yo, I'm not going to have what I had before overnight and what I experienced overnight. And it's going to take time. It's going to take some work on yourself, and it's going to take.
You're working on yourself. Yeah.
It's gonna take a lot of effort. And obviously, this is another podcast topic in itself.
But go off, dude.
But at the same time, like if you are struggling in your romantic life and you are struggling and trying to land someone's so fucking weird to say, but if you're trying to be in a serious relationship, I think you need to look at how much time and effort you are putting into each prospective person. That makes sense. And how much effort you are willing to put forward and how much you trust this person. And obviously, if you trust them way too much after the first date, then bro, you got some
expectation. Like too much expectation, you're letting yourself
way too much expectations. There have been a lot of girls in not a lot of girls, but there have been some girls in the past like couple months that I have liked and that I have seen as a romantic partner that I have just totally fumbled the bag with because my expectations were way too high and there was just something wrong, man. And like I'm telling you guys, like take your time. But also don't be afraid to make mistakes because at the end of the day, the worst thing a girl or a guy can say is no. And obviously,
screenshots your fucking DMs.
Obviously,
ghosted block your combo.
Ghosted to block combo.
Yeah, we have a therapy conversation after this, bro. Off the record, man.
But what I'm trying to say is casually date, but also like know what you want out of like what you're getting into.
Take time to reflect, see what didn't work out, see what did work out.
Yeah. Because I think if I didn't make those mistakes and if I didn't take those chances, I wouldn't be in the mindset that I am now, where I'm like, man, I just gotta take time for myself and the right person will come. And I do believe that. Eventually the right person will come. And the right person who fits your situation at that time will be willing to grow with you into whatever situation that you're going to get into. You know what I mean? And that kind of segues into our next question, which is boundaries and personal space and time in relationships and how to balance.
This topic is for people who are hyper empaths that care a lot about people but don't know how to take care of themselves.
Yes.
Does anyone want to go first?
I think I can go first.
Just keep going.
This was a very, very big problem. And I feel bad. I don't want to like dox this person. I'm gonna try my hardest to not dox my past relationships.
Be objective as you can.
I'm being objective as I can.
But it's a lived experience.
Obviously, this is a lived experience that's coming from me. So I'm sorry to any of my past relationships. I'm unfortunately going to talk about it, and there's no hard feelings. There's no hard feelings, and I'm definitely sure that we've both grown from the relationship. Yeah, I'm putting this disclaimer in because I really don't want to hurt your feelings, and I still do care about you.
The mindfulness, the empathy in you.
So boundaries and personal space. I think I really, me and the person I was dating before really struggled with this. So we were both dancers, and we were both pretty young when we got into the relationship. Granted, this was probably like a 3-year relationship around there, and I think the one thing that we kind of struggled with, I was going through a lot of mental problems at that time too. So not all the blame is going to be on myself or her. It was just a miscommunication with the both of us. I think that the thing that we definitely struggled with boundaries the most. It was definitely like, and boundaries with like time in regards to time and how much time we would spend with each other. And it was like we'd wake up, I'd go to school, and then I'd spend time with her. Then we go to dance and spend more time with each other. And then after dance, we'd spend more time with each other and then go home. And at first, for a lot of relationships that are starting out, that's all you want to do. All you want to do is spend time with that person. But I think after a while, like after you spend like almost a year or two with them, you start to realize that like, damn, I want more time to myself. Like I still want to enjoy the things that I enjoyed beforehand. I think because of like the lack of boundaries that we set for each other, the both of us started to lose friends. We started to lose hobbies. We started to lose touch with a lot of people because at the end of the day, we only really thought we needed each other. And that's kind of a toxic way of kind of seeing the relationship. And neither of us wanted to say anything because we didn't want to hurt each other's feelings. And obviously, at the end of the day, boundaries, definitely, if you are setting it at that point in your relationship, it's going to hurt someone's feelings. It's because you've been thinking that way for so long and you've been kind of living that way for so long. Having a change might seem offensive to the other person. And definitely, like when she would set boundaries and when I would set boundaries at the time, we both got offended because we were like, oh, do you not love me enough to...
Like, threaten your existence.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do you not love me enough to spend that time with me? Do you not love me enough to like be in your thoughts like that? And it was a very, very toxic way of thinking about that stuff. And I think once we finally set that boundary and we finally set that time for each other, we started to actually drift away in a sense because we started to realize that we were growing from that type of relationship, and that relationship that we had, that we kind of fell in love with, wasn't there anymore. And I think that's kind of the love that was lost eventually. And we didn't really mature with the boundaries that we were setting. And our love didn't mature with the boundaries we were setting. And I think that's kind of one of the main reasons why me and her kind of broke up, because I realized that I started to become more and more unhappy the more and more boundaries we set, because it just felt like we weren't as compatible anymore as we were going on and growing in life. And early on in the relationship, I'm definitely a very big empath. I would think that like everything was my fault, and if it was ever her fault, is because I didn't love her hard enough. And if I wasn't making time for her, that was my fault, and I should be making more time for her. I should be putting forward more effort. And there was at one point in the relationship where she asked me like, where was that guy that was so in love with me 6 months ago?
But keep in mind that part came from a place of hurt.
Like, granted, like I'm the one who set that expectation, and I'm the one who didn't set those boundaries early on. Granted, some of it is because I was young, some of it was because I was inexperienced, but now I do realize that is a very toxic way of thinking. But don't get me wrong, I also thought that way too. Like if she ever took time for her family, or if she ever took time for dance or something like that, and she wouldn't listen to me, then I would be angry. I would tell her like, why are you not making these sacrifices for me? Like I thought relationships were a two-way street. And to be honest, in my opinion, relationships aren't always 50-50. And I think it was you that was talking about this to me, but relationships will never always be 50-50. Some people may need that 70, and it'll be a 70-30. And then some other people
69-41 or 31.
What? And some other people.
Okay, sorry, I can't do math.
You know what I mean? But when you go back to normal, when you go back to having that 50-50, when you go back to having that comfortableness, then the toxic trait is noticing that they weren't giving that 70 anymore when you don't need that extra 30-40%. Sorry. And I think in a healthy relationship, you understand that that person is sacrificing a little bit more because you need it. And once it goes back to normal and they don't need to sacrifice that time or that effort anymore, noticing that like, oh, I was going through a rough time and they were there for when I needed it. And now we're comfortable. I don't need them to keep giving me that stuff because I don't need it. You know what I mean? I have other things to supplement my life. And then it also happens the reverse. Like when you need it, obviously you expect that person to be there for you.
I have a lot of opinions about that. But go ahead.
But obviously it's not a granted. But I just think that like setting boundaries and having personal space and like time for yourself is very, very important in a relationship. And I think that's what leads to healthier relationships. If you can set a somewhat agreeable boundary, because not everything's going to be perfect and not everything's going to be perfectly balanced, but being able to set that kind of boundary shows a nurturing and mature relationship going forward, and that's what will complement your long-term relationship. Granted, I was in a very long-term relationship, and it wasn't all very super healthy, and I think that's what Jason and Vince were saying. Like, not all long-term relationships are going to be super healthy. And a lot of them are going to either have bumps in the road, obviously, but once you notice that a lot of the stuff that you guys have been doing aren't necessarily super, super healthy and super, super beneficial for each other, that's when you start to realize, like, man, our long-term relationship isn't like, it just isn't healthy. And obviously, I'm going to touch on this, like calling it quits, and it's just a bump, but I will save my words for.
No worries. Do you want me to go first? Or you want?
Up to you.
Sure, I'll take. I just break the fucking momentum because I feel like we're like doing like we'll make it more popcorny. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I am so fucking anal time about boundaries that like since from like I was young, I've always been more of a hardline boundary setter. But I think as I got older, I started to be more mindful about other people's feelings. The codependency thing, that's a very hard thing to break.
Yeah.
Codependency and like because what is that? I see these fucking like what is it? You know the freaking relationship Twitter where they give advice about everything. Where like you shouldn't be having arguments, you should be having conversation, right? Where like sometimes when you set a boundary, an argument is like unedible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like sometimes you need to have the argument so that in the future you're able to have the conversation. Yes, I understand speaking out of a very level-headed, stoic mindset where you don't let your emotions get aside is a great way of handling things. But sometimes, like when you set a boundary, it does threaten people because like they're so used to it. So if you guys don't know, anger, like how it uses emotion is typically just as human beings is used to gain control. So that's biologically what it's designed for, is to gain control, right? So typically, and I think you kind of touch on this where it's like, oh, you should be there for me, right? Where with people who are codependent, and that can be for multiple reasons. It can be from neglect or like abuse or whatever, like whatever. When they find someone that's able to satisfy that, they tend to become codependent because they themselves have a hard time self-regulating, right? So when you ask for time for yourself, you can communicate with them, and they're like, yeah, I get it. Like you need time for yourself. Like that's what, and like they're agreeing with you, and they totally understand. But like when you leave, their body physically gets irritated that you're gone, and they start to hold resentment without them even realizing it, to a point where it's like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? And like, so I noticed this, and like, of course, I hate talking about my problems in like in public because like I talk shit about a lot of things, but I don't talk about my relationship problems on them. Yeah. So, but yeah, that was I guess like a conflict that took like my partner a while to fix. Where like it wasn't even about like asking for space, like because even when I was in the same room as her, and this is something that I would say would my fault, is I have a tendency to zone out a lot because I just. Me getting stuck in my own thoughts, I get sad as fuck. That's just how like humans work, right?
Yeah.
So
I feel
I'm very used to just zoning out. So sometimes I'll be on Twitter or whatever, and like she would get pissed as fuck, and I'm like, what the hell? So, and it was weird because I was so confused. I was like, you were just on your phone, and then so I thought it was okay if I was just, I could just scroll the internet, and then all of a sudden, like I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, right? Where and again, I'm not like, sorry, Karen, I'm not trying to freaking paint you as this person, but a lot of times when we kind of talked about, whereas when she gets upset or when she's sad, a lot of times like she had to go through neglect a lot of times, right? So like when I was gone, right, then it felt like it was betrayal, even though we communicate like I need my time and space, whatever. And then because she also feel guilty again because like, oh, I feel like I'm taking over your time, like So not only she felt bad for taking up my valuable time, right? But also she felt bad for, like me not being there, right? So it was a very hard conversation to have where it's like, but one thing I kind of like, we kind of like a big milestone we were able to get through, where it was like, it's not my responsibility to fill that void. You know what I mean? Which it's a very hard conversation to have because like that conversation was ugly. It wasn't even a conversation, it was just a fucking argument. It was just an ugly argument. And like that shit fucked me up. But overall, like I think going forward, like we were just a lot better, like maintaining that space too. Because like, when you're a person and you get comfortable with someone, right, and you start to adapt your lifestyle around that, the moment that it's gone, even though your brain is like, oh yeah, that makes sense, they need time for themselves, your body is like, fuck, I'm angry because I'm not getting what I want. You want to gain control. You want, like, that's what you're trying to do, because you, that thing that calms you down, that person that calms you down, that person that really brings you peace and solitude is no longer there, and then you tend to get angry to gain control. And the thing is, this wasn't even me that kind of like said this. This is like Karen was like kind of just came through emotional like breakthrough, where she was like, I noticed that I just would just antagonize you for no reason. She didn't know why, right? Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, yeah, like, and because I kind of talked about my insecurity, about how I feel like I constantly contemplate where I'm not morally correct all the time. Like, I'm trying to be the best person I can be, and I constantly feel like I'm a shitty person, right? So when I fuck up, like, it's like all hell breaks loose, right? You know what I mean? So, and one thing that, like, for those of you who are having a hard time, like, you know, respecting your partner's space, just like, I think not antagonizing them would take you a long way. No one wakes up in the morning trying to hurt you, unless it's out of revenge or they're a psychopath. But no one intentionally just comes out to, you know, to hurt someone, right? I don't wake up being like, how can I piss off my girlfriend? Like, that's not my fucking motive, right? No. And that was something that we definitely talked about, where, like, you know, when I'm gone, there was no resentment, right? Because, like, even though she's like, yeah, it's fine, like, I understand. And, you know, this is something that I don't think we'll ever disagree on, where I was like, I feel like you do hold on to resentment. It's like, no, like, I get over it, it's fine. I'm like, do you really though? Do you really? You know what I mean? Because, like, I sometimes I do feel like it does transfer over to some conversations, but that's whatever. Like, that's not really that big of a deal. But I can feel her emotions. I know she's upset. And, like, I'm trying to freaking use my whole psychoanalysis thing to, like, see what's wrong, right? And sometimes it's not even about that. Sometimes it's just about, like, really trying to empathize with each other and not trying to antagonize with each other, right? Because yes, your partner is gonna fuck up. You are also gonna fuck up. I think one thing that can really help is being patient with each other, and two, being patient with yourself. That unlearning behavior deep rooted in your subconscious is a lot harder than you think, right? So, and I think I forgot who said this, but it's like, when you're dating someone, when you marry someone, whatever, you're basically dating someone with a trauma, like with traumas and all their like, they say, like, you're taking in someone with their baggage, right? And that but that includes their traumas, that includes their triggers, right? And just the idea of, like, when someone sets a boundary on you, understand where they're coming from. One thing I kind of learned about setting boundaries was the whole I statement. So instead of saying, like, you don't give me enough time, you're fucking clingy, whatever, it's more of like, you explain how you feel. So it's like, I feel like I don't have enough time in my day to spend with Vince or Ronald or Lawrence or Ziad. I love you very much, but I also feel like I just, you know, don't have time for myself. I feel very overwhelmed. I need time to catch myself. I love you very much. It's not me asking for time, has nothing to do with me not loving you. It's me just trying to figure out my life as well. Because, like, there's times where I need to sit in my thoughts and just feel my emotions, because I'm constantly distracting myself. You're putting it on you, and, like, you're not putting the blame on you, but you're expressing how you feel. And that's like, and that's something I kind of learned when setting boundaries, where I use the I statement, where it's not about, like, you need to stop doing this, I hate when you do this, blah, blah. It's like more of like how you explain how you feel. And I know that's very hard for men to, like, explain, you know, how you feel, but it definitely does incite a lot of people, or like, lets them empathize with you. Because, like, if you were like, yo, you're fucking crazy, right? They're gonna get pissed off as fuck, right?
No cap, bro.
But if you said, you hurt my feelings, that's a totally different statement, and they're able to rationalize how their actions impact you. You know what I mean? Now, there are some people, and this is where I kind of talk about, like, narcissism, and I don't want to talk about this because I will get on a tangent, but that just are, like, set on disagreeing with you. And at that point, it's like, you're over explaining yourself. You know what I mean? You're trying to set your boundaries. Like, you know, it's, you know, at that point, it's like, it's not really your fault. At that point, it's like, okay, now I've done my part. You need to move, right? Because I feel like, especially if you're someone who is, like, an unhealed empath, or someone who's just really empathetic for people, not myself, I'm fucking narcissistic as hell, but for those who really care, right? You tend to blame yourself, like, why the fuck is the relationship going wrong? You know what I mean? You put in all this effort, but it's like, no, like, sometimes, yes, there are something that I need to work on, but they need to pull their fucking weight. And sometimes you need to put your foot down and be like, hey, this is not okay. And that's obviously, that's a confrontation, and that's going to lead to argument. But some people are so fucking coward that they don't want to confront their partner, because it's like, they don't want to hurt their feelings. There are some times where you have to say, fuck their feelings, and you really have to get through this shit. Because avoiding conflict, they just build resentment, and then you guys end up like hating each other, and you don't know why, and you're not able to solve the problems. You know what I mean?
Yes, bro.
So boundaries are so fucking important because people are like, oh, and like, you know, I talked to like a few like Christian girls, like, yeah, forgiveness, you know, you gotta forgive, right? It's like, yeah, I understand you gotta forgive because that helps you not hold resentment. But sometimes, like, if that person is fucking doing that shit over and over again, and you're explaining yourself, and you're not like and they're not listening, then sometimes you have to have that little bit of assertiveness, be like, hey, this is enough. And sometimes they don't even have to understand. You just have to explain, like, hey, I don't appreciate this. This hurts me. Stop. And like whatever that is, whether that's space, whether that's like, you know, they, I don't know, curse at you, whatever, or like they raise their voice when they're angry, you know what I mean? Because like no one's trauma, no one's triggers is like that's not, sorry. Someone's trauma and someone's trigger is not permission to treat you like shit.
Yes.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so a lot of times you can try to like, especially when someone's angry and someone's like not in the right headspace, they're not thinking rationally. Like that's just not how that works. They're not crazy. They're just angry. And it's hard to think rationally when you're angry. And that's the same for men too. Like women are not crazy. Men are not crazy. You know what I mean? It's just like when you are emotionally stimulated, it's hard to be like, you know, level-headed. But if you really care about yourself as well, as much as you care about the other person, boundaries are very important. It's not about them trying to understand all the time. It's a matter about protecting your livelihood so that you're able to love. Boundaries are not about like putting walls up to protect yourself. They're about putting walls up or putting boundaries so that you're able to love correctly without getting hurt.
Yeah,
That's true. And I guess like my point was, it's about codependency as well, because like I feel like a lot of us, or like everyone, has their first experience of relationships in like high school, middle school. And I know when I had relationships during that time, like it was all about, and it was kind of dumb, but like how often do you hear in your relationships in the middle school or high school, like phrases like, oh, I need you, or you complete me, or some shit, some cringe
You
shit
don't need
like
each
that.
other. Sorry, go on. I talk too much.
And like the thing is, like, you know how our parents are like, oh, don't like be in a relationship until you're like graduate or whatever. I kind of agree with that, bro. It's just like,
you know what my mom said?
What?
She was like, your first girlfriend's gonna be your training wheels. I'm not kidding. That's what she said.
I mean, it's kind of true.
yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
but it's kind of true, because like when you're in high school and you're in middle school, your life is not that hard yet, bro. Like
no, not at all.
you
bro.
don't have a lot of things to balance. Like, for example, you're probably not working. You're probably not dying in university, or you're
you want to kill yourself.
You're not unpacking your you're not unpacking your traumas.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, like in a relationship, you have to deal with all of that, plus be there for your partner, right? And when you're in high school or middle school, like a lot of time you spend is with your partner, and then it's just kind of expected that, oh, your problems are my problems. But that's true to some extent, but at some point you got to tackle your own demons by yourself.
Yeah, bro.
Right?
You're not your partner's parent.
Exactly.
No.
And that's where kind of like codependency comes in, where you know, if you want to spend time with your friends, like you guys have mentioned, they'll be like, oh, like who's gonna be there? Who you hang out with? And like, oh, who you texting? Like, and like
Porn premium. That's what I'm texting. No,
sharing like have feeling the obligation to share your like iPhone password or whatever the fuck.
God damn, bro.
And it's like, in a relationship, you should trust the other person to act in your best interest, to respect you even when you're not there. Because if they don't, you'll leave them. That's kind of like the it's not really like the fear. It's more like, you know, a mutual respect between you two to not hurt each other, and knowing that, you know, if you do that, like, I don't deserve that. I'm gonna like, you know, this isn't right for me. But I feel like, you know, your partner isn't you, especially when you're a young adult or like a teenager. You need time to develop yourself. Like, what do you 100%. Like? What are your limits in terms of like, I don't know, time you spend with your partner, time you spend with yourself, your friends, your family, your job, your studies. That's a lot of shit to balance. And if you're always like, oh, like I need you, and like, why aren't you there for me? And maybe you're not ready to be in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote down here that like all of that mindset's like, a relationship is not meant. It's only to complement your life. It's not meant to be your life.
No,
It's
You have many things in
you
your
have
life.
many
many
you have many
things.
aspects in your life that kind of complete you.
Mhm.
And if you oh man,
that make your identity.
I'm gonna like put my engineering hat on and think of a pie chart, right?
The engineer.
I put my psych hat, so go on, just do your thing, bro.
think of a pie chart, right? If your pie chart like is all relationship, you know the memes like 1%.
Yeah.
If your relationship takes over all of that, then it may not be healthy. It's probably not healthy.
Now,
because-
1% is you, and the thing is, you have 100% of focus to give,
exactly,
and so giving 100% to relationship is not actually the best
Yeah.
way to.
Mhm.
and a lot of
Resource
that
management.
can lead to like also mental health and burnout problems, because that 1%, think of what you're dedicating that 1% to:
You're dividing that 1%.
yourself, your work, your studies, your friends, and eventually the shoe's got to drop, or the whatever that fucking saying is, like the other shoe's got to drop, or whatever the fuck. Something's got to drop.
Don't
right?
drop
Like,
the da-da-da.
don't drop that.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, like, you'll either lose your friends, you'll have a bad relationship with like your family,
You lose yourself.
yourself, like,
you fucking you're done.
your
bro.
studies might suffer, and like you might
dishonor your
not
family,
perform
like-
at work.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
my kind of the point is, like, put yourself first always. Like, if you're in a relationship,
Yes.
put yourself first always. Like, your partner shouldn't go above you in your priority.
Mhm.
Because you should have that self-respect for yourself. If you don't have that self-respect for yourself, your partner won't. And I'm not saying that your partner is like an asshole, but they could use that to take advantage of you. So
Yes.
It's
Yes.
unconscious too. Like, it's not, there's not intentionally trying to hurt you, but it's like if they notice that they can push you, like,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they will start doing it, because if they notice that they can just take your time by whining, if they notice they can like gain control by yelling, unconsciously, they're not saying they listen to me by yell, then they will start to do that.
yeah,
So
Mhm.
boundaries are important.
that's where the boundaries come in.
Yeah.
And if they don't respect it, then show them the door, man. Like,
Yeah, and I think
Shake-
I think to add on, like, I as a very big empath, like I'm a super empathetic person. If you ever think that like you're not ever good enough in that relationship, bro, then like I think you're just lying to yourself. And if you're like, a lot of the times when I was just in relationships, I was always thinking to myself, like, if I don't do this, I'm not good enough. If I don't do this for this person, I'm not good enough. And that becomes a thing where it's like I'm empathetic, but I'm also very codependent on the person. And then when you put that shit together, that becomes very, very toxic, because when you're super, super codependent on that person, you start to look for that person for validation and everything. And and like for me, it was validation in like romance, it was validation in like what I was doing in life. And as soon as that starts to seep over into that 1% that you're already giving to everything else in your life, obviously I was giving 99% of my pie chart to that person. Once you start giving that 1% and you start spreading yourself too thin, other things start to seep into your life. And as soon as you give that 100% or like that 99.9% of yourself, then that's when it becomes super, super toxic. And I think don't be afraid if you are ever going through kind of that mental struggle in your head where you have to work on yourself and shit like that. One, you should not be in a relationship if you are having those thoughts. But two, don't be afraid to set boundaries and be like, yo, I need this time to improve myself, to work on myself, and do this shit and do that shit and whatever. But obviously, you also need to reevaluate, like, am I actually like able to be in this relationship if I'm feeling this way? I think that's what a lot of people kind of struggle with, especially when they're kind of like going through mental health issues. It's not that you don't deserve to be loved and you don't deserve to have someone. It's like you just got to work on yourself, and you got to figure out like what else can you use in your life to really to really fulfill it.
You know why I think like a lot of people get really touched or mad about setting boundaries, like bring it back to like a relationship kind of context.
Yeah.
When you're setting a boundary for yourself and it's constructive kind of boundary, the other person, going back to like your point, Ronald, on like they didn't think of it first.
Yeah.
It's like they wanted to fix you, right?
Yeah.
It's like that hero kind of mentality in relationships.
The
Where like,
hero
Bro.
mentality can suck my ass.
yeah,
bro.
it's like, oh, like I can fix them. It's like,
I gotta humble them.
and then when you, the person who's setting the boundary, is like, hey, I need this time to like work on myself. I got this and this to kind of like deal with. And then the person who's the boundary is being set on is probably like, oh shit, why didn't I think of this? Like, like I can fix it. Like we can work on it together, right? And that's okay. Sorry to get on a tangent, but that's the
no, go off,
that's
bro.
the biggest.
This episode 3 hours.
No, we can split it. We're splitting it. So like that phrase, like we can work on it together, works for some issues, like, but if
like, what do you want to eat or something? I don't know.
or if it's issues like that you have to work on yourself, it's if you realize that, okay, this problem, it's like a personal one.
Like you need to learn how to self-regulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like my trauma and my like past that I have to heal myself, and you have nothing to deal with. You have nothing to do with it. So let me fix me so that I can contribute my like best to the relationship. And a lot of people don't like that because like when you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, like we can
I'm
do anything.
supposed to be supportive. I'm supposed to.
We can do anything
my
together. Like
God.
we'll get through this together and stuff like. But at times, like you just need to let the other person have their time. And if you don't, then I guess you guys have already touched on it. They'll end up resenting you because because they haven't had that chance to heal.
Mhm.
So if someone is setting a boundary on you, don't take it personally. Unless of course, like someone calls you out on your shit, then maybe like, oh. Sometimes boundary can work.
There's accountability, and then there's
Sometimes boundaries can also work like that. Where if someone's setting a boundary on you, it's like they're shining a mirror on yourself because, like, oh, I now see like my kind of
how my actions affect you.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and that's where the I statement comes in. That's why
exactly. So boundaries, good thing. And I mean, to move on to the next topic, and I guess it's kind of we've kind of touched on it a little bit. When you set a boundary, oftentimes it can lead to disagreements or conflict.
You shouldn't argue. You should only have conversations.
Yeah,
Fuck
and like
fuck that shit, bro.
the next topic is about dealing with conflict in a relationship.
Being stoic 100% of the time is literally impossible. I don't know who I was like, yeah, you just gotta be level-headed and objective. Have objective commentary. Like
you can't, because like if you really care about that person, if you like love that person, then you obviously you'll feel strongly, right? And you can't just be like, okay, let's talk about it.
I do agree of taking time, because this is something that I talk with Karen where like sometimes when I get pissed off as fuck, I would firstly take time away so that I'm able to speak, right? Because obviously the goal is to be like level-headed, but there are times where like I feel like people won't take you seriously if you're like too passionate in what you're saying, like, oh, you're not being objective. It's like, well, like I still have a point, you know, just because I'm upset has nothing to do with like if you're like you have to explain, you have to understand that it's like that thing where it's like, you know, like the whole like, and not to use BLM as an example, but where like people were mad at the looting and like kind of pointing at the looting instead of like the issues that were happening, right? Where they point more about the reaction as opposed to the harm that they were doing, right?
Yeah.
Where that's gaslighting, right? We know that's gaslighting, right?
Yep.
So, you know, there are times where yes, I mean, theoretically, yes, we have to be like level-headed and whatever to like really have a conversation. But when you hurt someone, really just making about how mad they are really just deflects and not really lets you hold yourself accountable, right? Yeah, because like if you're handling these disagreements, you definitely, of course, there are times where like, okay, maybe I'm being micromanaged, but also being willing to admit that like, hey, I'm also in the wrong, but also saying, hey, they're also in the wrong here. Wrong here, you know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of people just are so stubborn and like want to fight for their existence that they care more about being right than understanding their partner or understanding people. And this is just like conflict in general, right? But we're talking about romantic relationships where sometimes they'll get petty, right? And I've been guilty. I do this shit all the time where I'm like petty and like, sarcastic as hell just to show how stupid someone is sometimes. And I know that's not the best solution, and I'm definitely trying to work on it. But definitely instead of just trying to like prove you are right, really come with the mindset that you're trying to understand and be understood, not being correct. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
No worries.
go ahead.
And just to kind of build on that point, and the point that like you have to be level-headed in kind of like when you're dealing with problems. So my partner and I like kind of like before when we had a problem, we were complete opposite. So I would, whenever a problem came up, I would just like raw thoughts, like out there, no time to think. And then she's kind of more like reserved and needs time to reflect.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I brought that kind of problem, before even thinking about it, like how she would react is kind of like with shock, and like she can't say anything and then I would be like, so you're not going to say anything? So that's kind of like on me, and not realizing that people have different ways of handling conflict. And like that, some of that comes from like trauma or just like not being able to like process your thoughts properly. But what kind of resolves that is, unless it's like an emergency situation, taking like a half a day or a day to kind of recollect your thoughts,
think
and
about
then
it,
coming back to the table and being able to have that like soul kind of level-headed conversation, right, with your partner, instead of just emotions and like throwing things and stuff like that. I mean,
you're insulting each other.
And so that's a fight. Like that's not constructive or helpful to a relationship. When you're able to come to the table and be able to listen, and that's kind of like the most important thing, you have to be able to listen and understand where the other side is coming from, and kind of compromise on a solution, like your classic conflict resolution kind of techniques or whatever the fuck. That also applies in relationships. So what I've learned is like, okay, we don't need to address this like right away.
Yeah, that's something I learned.
If it's not like
I got called on that
life
shit.
or death situation.
Yeah.
This can wait. And as long as both of us are willing to come back to the table and talk about it, when we both recollected our thoughts, when we're both able to listen to one another, then it's gonna be more helpful than just fighting or me shouting at her and her kind of being shocked. So if you're in a relationship and like you're fighting all the time, then maybe the best way is not to deal with it for a while and just let things simmer down.
Take time to reflect.
Take time to calm down. And because anger is kind of like, it never solves anything.
No.
Sometimes you say things that you regret, and
100%.
And like
So much to say.
the other side of that, which I really, and it's kind of childish and I really don't like, is people who avoid conflict like at all costs. Like who are like, it's no big deal. It's no big deal.
I can get over it.
I can get over it.
It's my fault. It's my fault.
And then they just let it bottle up, and kind of like that passive aggressiveness,
the pettiness.
It's a bitch.
I'm like, just say it, man. Just say it, because like I know.
But at the same time, you have to understand that maybe they've been gaslighted, so they have a hard time talking, right? So, but anyway, go on.
So I know like women have this like reputation of just being like, oh, it's fine,
like petty.
But men can do that too. Like
100%. 100%.
Like bottling it up and saying, oh, it's no big deal, like passing it off, and that kind of ties into boundaries as well, because if you set a boundary and someone crosses it, obviously, that's a problem, right? And you have to talk about it. But if you keep saying, oh, it's fine, in your heart that other person is a good person, but you're kind of, what you're doing when you do that is you're shrinking your boundary,
making excuses for them, and you're allowing them to disrespect you, and you're building resentment for
exactly
them.
Yeah. So, and they don't mean to kind of encroach on your boundary, but if you let them, naturally they will, because they're not they're human. They're not always thinking like, oh, like
They can't read your mind.
yeah, they can't read your mind. They're not always like micromanaging their own actions. So we're all human with boundaries. You have to enforce them and remind them. That doesn't mean that I have to constantly like remind them like, oh, do this, do this, do this. That doesn't mean like they're a bad person. It just means they're human, and sometimes they like we need reminders as well, right?
Yeah, because unlearning that behavior is probably going to take some time. Because I feel like, what is it? I know a lot of people, and like a lot of people in the world, like they hate repeating themselves, right? It's like, I get you hate repeating yourself, but it's not like, I don't know, like let's say you're at a workplace, right? And you tell your employee to do a task, right? And then you correct their behavior, right? Sometimes they will get it right away. Sometimes, and most often, they won't do it perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like a lot of people's like, oh, I just don't want to repeat myself, though. It's like, unfortunately, sometimes that has to happen. You know what I mean? And again, just kind of like putting a line where you're not reparenting them, but especially when someone has like a deep-rooted like behavior that's like very hard to unlearn, you need to patience comes a long way. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, and I kind of going back to the whole antagonize thing, where I feel like a lot of us tend to antagonize someone when they constantly get on our buttons and then not really like communicate like what's bothering you, right? And even the most empathetic and mindful person can't read your mind, right? And some people kind of just, their intention is not to hurt you, but because they're so used to just behaving a certain way, they sometimes are just not mindful on how their actions affect other people. That's with everyone, right?
Yep.
And of course, we should take our time to reflect, but also like even saying, hey, can we talk about this later is also enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just the idea of like, hey, I don't have the capacity to talk to you right now, or I don't have the capacity to help, or whatever that looks like. It's like, hey, can we talk later? You know what I mean?
Like you don't have to talk about it right now, but
you don't have to solve it right away.
You have to bring it to their attention, like, oh, you what you did hurt me, and like I want to talk about it, but like whenever you're ready and stuff like that, right? So it kind of like when you put it like that, like it kind of respects their boundaries as well, and allows them to reflect on like I never thought of it like that, and then like instead of I'm gonna use like a boxing analogy, like instead of putting them on the ropes, you'll let them like have a breather so that they can kind of reflect on their own actions. And
then you can beat the shit out of them after.
Beat the shit out of them later.
I think that's so important because and one thing you could probably say is like, hey, I'm not level-headed to speak right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can we talk later? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's something that, especially when I get in conflicts with like my partner, like, and I started to do this a lot more. Where I was like, hey, I don't have the capacity to speak right now, right?
Yeah.
Whether she has a problem or something, right? Like something's going on in her life, and like I feel guilty because I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be a support partner, blah blah. But I'm honest with like, hey, I don't have the capacity to speak right now. I'm like depressed as fuck right now. I'm fucking shirtless, eating Cheetos in my bed or something. You know what I mean? Like I need time just to reflect so that I'm able to speak, so I can be a support partner, so I can be, the partner that you need right now. But
Damn. I think a lot of the biggest disagreements and a lot of the biggest fights that I've had with past partners have always been ones where we've tried to solve it on spot.
Yeah,
always been ones where
I'm a guilty one too. Because
I'm just like I want to get this fucking over with, and I want to argue right now.
Wait, before you, that was actually something that I was listening to because I was at Karen's house and her mom was listening to a podcast where they were saying how men tend to have like the left brain, whatever. Yeah. When it comes to conflict, they try to solve it right away. They're they're problem solvers, and they weren't sure if it was from socialization or because of genetics, right? But they're theorizing mostly from socialization. But women are more lucky in the present and how they feel, right? Yeah. So a lot of times we're like, and this is for men because this is a men's mental health podcast. But if you are like in a conflict and you're trying to like get them to understand right away, dude, just take a minute.
Yeah, bro.
Because like, sometimes solving the problem right away isn't always the best solution because you can solve it, but if they still feel resentment or if you still feel resentment, there could be a bitter aftertaste.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, do your thing.
For me, like I've always had the biggest fights when like I've always tried to solve it in the moment, and I've always been like, oh, why are you feeling like this? Why are you doing like that?
Just talk.
It's always like did I do something wrong? Like what am I doing wrong? And it's always been like, and then it becomes like a big, huge, blown out argument, and nothing constructive happens because you guys either leave that shit more upset than you were in the beginning, or somewhat like either both of your feelings are hurt, one person's feelings are hurt, or the other person's feelings are hurt, and that's not constructive for anyone because you guys end up saying things you regret. There's no like thought behind what you guys are saying. It's like no, you're a fucking whatever, and it's like no, you're a fucking that, right? And
You're a fucking Jimbo.
And there's nothing constructive behind it. I've always found that when you do kind of have those conflicts, it's always good to kind of think about it for a couple of days and kind of think about what's going on and then come back to it. I think for me, I've always felt like, especially when it comes to fights or arguments or disagreements, there's nothing wrong with branching out and asking people what they did wrong or what you did wrong in a specific problem. Obviously, if it's super, super serious, then obviously you keep it between the two. But I've never encountered a big problem where I've gone to a peer, a very close trusted peer of mine, where I'm like, yo, so this happened between me and my girl, and I just want your outside opinion on it. And more often than not, Vince is my confidant. And Vince will tell me like, bro, you're actually being a fucking dumbass. Or like, or he'll be like, I agree. I see what point you're making here. And I think having someone's outside perspective gives you a little bit more insight into realizing what deep-rooted problems you have and what you can kind of bring to the table in that argument. But I also do believe that a relationship and disagreements are always between two people. So obviously taking a minute to kind of think about it yourself, and then if you are stumped, going to outside.
Yeah, there's a difference between talking shit about your relationship and then asking for help.
Yeah.
Yes, big difference.
Yes. And I think that's super. It's super important to go to friends that won't just echo what you're thinking.
Being yes man.
Being yes man and be like, oh,
people pleasers.
You're totally right here. Like,
you should have hit her or some shit like that.
You should
make sure the friends you talk to can challenge you on your position as well. And this is kind of something that I've had to learn as well, where often if a problem comes up, I don't bring it up to my partner. I like talk to other people first, right? And it's super important just to like, as you said, like bring it up with the two people who are in the disagreement first, and then if you're stumped, go get advice, right? Because really the problem isn't between like you and your friends; it's between you and your partner. So you should like try to solve it within that like frame first, and then go get advice.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking for help, you know? That's that's the 100%. Premise.
So and I feel like a lot of disagreements that have gone on for a really long time, where me and my previous partners have gone together and we still haven't found a resolution, actually going to other people and asking, and obviously people that can challenge you and asking them for advice will genuinely benefit your relationship going forward, because they offer just a different perspective, and it's not always like, especially when it becomes like a more petty thing.
And they're emotionally not tied to relationships, so they're able to think more objectively. I think this thing that Flores said, he was like, you know, because Flores is really good at giving advice, but he was saying like, bro, when you're just in that emotion, like sometimes you just don't think, you let your emotions get ahead of you, right? And now I forgot what the wording he used, but I was like, dude, that's so fucking smart. We're like, you know, we all give each other advice and we all know how to have a relationship, but when we're in the fucking heat of it, we're dumbasses. We're in the trenches, bro.
We're like, fuck you.
We're in the bathroom shirtless, you know, with our high socks and like just dying from that McDonald's meal at 2 a.m. Anyway, but that was a good advice that like a statement that Flores said. And I was like, bro, you're so fucking right. Cause like, I think we all can give pretty good advice because we're not tied to that romantic relationship, right? So sometimes you do need a friend who can be a little more objective, whether you're in the right or whether you're in the wrong, and how to approach said conflict. You know what I mean? So,
I think also just having disagreements with your partner is going to happen inevitably. You're two different people, and it's always going to be like that. I feel like a lot of people, especially in those like naive high school relationships, are like, oh my god, we're just on the same wavelength.
We're never gonna fight.
We're like our twin flame. We're never gonna fight. We're never gonna fight and shit. And I'm just like, no. Like, give it a year or two, and you guys are going to be fucking wanting to kill each other and at each other's necks. At times, not all the time, but at times. And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with your partner or having that argument or having that conflict, because one, you come out of it with knowing that like, oh, they do disagree with this, and we can come to a solution or a compromise. And two, like it I think letting off steam and being stoic all the time in an argument is going to kill you.
It's gonna piss people off.
I remember me personally in a couple of my past relationships, whenever we would argue, I'd be as calm as I could, because my brother knows this. Whenever I would have a disagreement with my parents, more specifically my mom, it would be yelling fights. Like we'd scream at each other. And like going forward in a lot of my romantic relationships, I'm like, I don't want to ever yell at my partner. And I don't ever want to get to that tone that's close to it. And so I've always, like, whenever I've had a argument with my partner, I'm like, okay, so I made you feel like that. And to be honest, talking like that will piss anyone off. Dude, I'm not even capping. Like if it's like if your partner's like, no, what you fucking did was fucking stupid, and you're like, okay, I'm sorry I made you feel like that.
Like they don't think you're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
They think you're trolling them. Like,
Trolling. Turn on the live like.
And to be honest, like, but also there's the flip side where if you're acting like that all the time, or you're acting stoic and you're trying to be super calm, on the flip side, you're going to explode. And the first time I ever
you're not feeling your emotions.
Every time the first time we got into an argument and I exploded, like my partner at the time told me like, I was fucking scared of you. Like I've never seen you like that. And bro, I was like full on like screaming. Like I threw my jacket down on the ground. I was like, man, fuck this shit. Like what the fuck are you so angry about? And like it was the first time I'd ever talked about that. But to be honest, like after I was like, damn, that felt fucking good. But obviously there's more constructive ways to kind of like let your anger out and communicate it across, because no one should ever be like, you know, like in that yelling kind of anger, because it's not constructive.
And you're hurting people while you do that, right?
But there's nothing wrong in an argument with speaking a little bit more passionately, like being like, yeah, no, you really did fucking hurt me, and putting emotion into it, and putting a little bit of emotion behind
you're
it.
Human.
And I was like, every time I would have an argument, I'd always just be like, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. And, like, I'm thinking,
you're giving me the light skin face, bro.
I'm thinking about it now, and I'm like, man, I'm a fucking dumbass. Like,
but like you didn't know, because like
I didn't know. Like,
you had like trauma from like this like yelling, right? So you as a retaliation, you're like, I don't want to be like that, right? You did everything in your power to make sure that didn't happen.
Like I never got into that it never escalated to that. But then eventually, like, because I was acting like that all the time, it just eventually escalated to that. I remember one of the biggest fights I ever had with one of my past partners was just us screaming at each other in I don't want to dox it, but just screaming at each other after a dance practice. And it was just us two, and we're screaming at each other in the dark. And I'm like, damn, that's crazy. Like, and
let me turn the AC up real quick.
let me lock up real quick. But yeah, it's just like, don't be afraid to have like emotion when you guys are arguing. But just make sure that you have the mindfulness enough. And I know it's super hard to, when you're emotionally driven, to have the mindfulness enough to like not get to that point where you are super fucking angry and you are like throwing shit around and stuff like that, because that's when it becomes toxic, and that's when you're like,
because like we hear the statement like hurt people, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that's okay, right? Because you have permission to hurt other people, right? Where the reason why we say that is because a lot of times that comes from just being hurt emotionally. So we tend to have defense mechanisms that end up harming other people, right? Or defense mechanisms, right? So I think one thing I like to phrase it as is that always be willing to feel your emotions. And I feel like for men that's very difficult, because it's especially just to like hold it in or whatever. But also keep in mind that, like, for example, you know, like I know it's like a bad stereotype where like the woman has a black guy, and it's like, oh, he's only like that when he's angry, right? It's like, well, that's not acceptable, right? Because and it's like speaking back on the whole like antagonized thing, where, you know, I feel like I was being treated like I wasn't human, right? Whereas like, you know, and one of the I guess arguments, and I would say it was a little gaslighting, was like, oh, but like when I'm angry, I just can't help myself, like I'm just like this, right? And I was like, well, that's not acceptable, because I don't like being treated like emotional punching bag. Again, use an I statement, or like, I feel like I'm being treated like an emotional punching bag. I mean, where it's like, yes. And like, it's weird because like with my partner, like I still want to be able to make sure that she can feel her emotions in front of me, because a lot of times she feels like she has to hide them around other people. But it's like, I don't want you to have to like pretend you're happy when you're not, right? Like, you need to feel your emotion. But at the same time, it's like being an emotional punching bag sucks, because like, and kind of just diving into stuff at like, you know, my personal life, but I've been used to being treated like I wasn't human. I've been yelled at and like just expected to be stoic. It's like, especially being in toxic guy groups, where like, why the fuck are you so sensitive? What the hell? It's like, you know, I can't tolerate anymore. Like my capacity for being yelled at and treated like a shitbag is not okay, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, and I need to express that, right? Where I feel like people, yes, like feel your emotions, but just keep in mind like the way you treat other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's why we talk about it's important to take space from that person, because you don't want to hurt them, right? And it's always, if you want to solve the conflict, sometimes taking time away, you know, really gives you a level-headed to actually speak from a place of understanding and being understood. Yeah.
And like when you do take time away, like take that time away.
Yeah.
I feel like more often than not, after like kind of a disagreement or the starts of an argument, people take time away and then they like text their partner. Like, oh, I hope you're okay and shit like that. Like, yes, check in with your partner, but also like take that time away from each other.
Don't just go to McDonald's, come back, and then start fighting again. Like,
exactly. There's nothing wrong with like
eating on a burger.
Give me the wrong. You give me the wrong nugget sauce.
Yeah, then you treat the cash burger like shit too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
There's nothing wrong with like going to hang out with your friends after and fucking taking your time off the argument and taking your mind off of things to actually come back to it and think about it later on. But yeah, like take that fucking time away from that person. Like it there's nothing good comes from it, from
trying to solve it right away.
Trying to solve it right away, and like it constantly being on your mind, and you guys always constantly like in communication,
on and off fighting.
Yeah, and you're trying to have a good time, but you just can't get over it. You know?
Yeah. It's like, bro, if you text her like, I hope you're doing okay, and she leaves you on red, bro, don't text her again, bro. Just leave it.
Yeah, one thing I think, what is it? My partner are pretty comfortable. Just kind of wishing each other good night.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, it's a very petty good night, but it's a good night. You know what I mean? It's very like no, like, oh, I love you, miss you. It's like good night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But and I used to do that personally, right? But after a while, I was like, you know what? We'll talk about it soon when we can. I don't have to say that, right? Because I know that she knows, and she knows that I know, and I know that she knows that I know that she knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like we're gonna talk about this soon, right? We're not gonna put it aside. And like we talk about this, like, you know, we feel very confident currently right now how to resolve these conflict solutions, because in the beginning, we definitely did, like, we're very angry at each other, but like now I feel like we got to a point where we're actually able to have these conversations. But yeah, like sometimes you just don't have to over explain yourself. You know, like you know, I know a lot of people like because our argument is essentially two people trying to validate their lived experience, right? And it's very frustrating and it's a trauma response trying to over explain yourself, because you feel like you're trying so hard for them to understand, right? But you don't need them to understand right away. You know what I mean? I know it sucks, because like you're probably anticipating the argument, you're anticipating the conversation, you're probably analyzing in your head how you're going to communicate this, right? And you're probably pissed off because they're not listening to you, they're not really validating your feelings. But like at that very moment, as much as you want to be understood, and it is very important, yes, to be understood, taking that time just to reflect and to communicate that in a very level-headed does help tremendously. Yeah.
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 Cool.
Anything else we wanted to say?
No, good.